The afternoon sun cast sharp shadows over the liquidation auction at the historic estate. Rows of heavy machinery and discarded assets awaited final clearance under the open sky. Madison Clark stood at the perimeter, perfectly composed in a tailored suit. Her gaze swept over the remaining lots with the calculated precision of someone entirely in control. In the far corner sat an unlisted lot, a rusted, oxidized coupe partially hidden beneath a weathered canvas tarp, dismissed by everyone as mere scrap metal. From the back of the sparse crowd, Connor Hayes raised his bidding card. He offered $2,000 for the decaying frame, his voice steady and quiet. Madison's lips curved into a sharp, dismissive smile. She noted loudly that the buyer had just secured the most expensive pile of scrap metal in the city. A ripple of laughter moved through the attending crowd. Well-dressed collectors and casual observers shook their heads at the seemingly irrational financial decision. Connor remained entirely still. He did not blink, nor did he look toward the podium. His expression was a wall of cold, unreadable stone. Approaching the registration table, his grease-stained fingers grasped a pen. He smoothly filled out the bank draft, transferring the exact funds without a moment of hesitation. Madison watched his departure, her posture radiating superiority. She categorized him instantly as a fool parting with his money, entirely unaware of the strategic omission she had made. With the paperwork secured, Connor turned his back on the laughing crowd. He walked toward the exit as a flatbed tow truck arrived to collect the rusted artifact. The flatbed truck delivered the rusted frame to a dilapidated garage on the industrial outskirts of the city. Night settled over the quiet neighborhood. Inside, flickering fluorescent lights illuminated the vehicle. Stripped of its tarp, the car looked even more desolate in the cold artificial glow. Connor Hayes stood before it. He did not see scrap metal, he saw a calculated possibility waiting to be uncovered. Gathering a brass wire brush and chemical solvent, he approached the engine bay. His movements were precise and unhurried. For hours, he worked in absolute silence, meticulously clearing decades of oxidation from the lower section of the engine block. Slowly, beneath the heavy layers of rust, a secondary casting identification number began to emerge from the cold metal. Stepping away, Connor walked to a battered steel filing cabinet in the corner of the room, pulling open the bottom drawer. He retrieved a stack of yellowed, decades-old technical schematics and an unmailed letter, documents he had meticulously collected over 10 years. Spreading the papers under a desk lamp, he cross-referenced the newly revealed casting numbers with the faded historical records. The sequence matched perfectly. Without a change in expression, he released a slow, steady breath, a silent validation of his decade-long search. Connor picked up a digital camera and captured a single, stark photograph of the newly revealed engine casting number under the harsh work light. Moving to a worn laptop, he accessed a closed, anonymous network utilized exclusively by high-tier industrial collectors, uploading the image without any accompanying text. He closed the laptop screen. The action was final. Now, the silent signal was traveling through the highest echelons of the preservation community. Miles away, sunlight flooded Madison Clark's pristine glass-walled office. She sat behind a polished marble desk, reviewing the final tallies from the liquidation event. Her executive assistant entered rapidly, bypassing standard protocols to place a secure tablet directly onto the center of Madison's pristine desk. Madison picked up the device. Her sharp, calculated gaze scanned the incoming intelligence reports, her composed expression hardening into rigid lines of concern. The network chatter confirmed an anomaly. Gabriel Turner, a notoriously reclusive billionaire, had suddenly diverted his private jet directly toward the industrial outskirts of Cleveland. Her perfectly manicured fingers tapped rhythmically against the glass surface. Her posture stiffened as the implications of her earlier public assessment became visibly apparent. Back in the gritty industrial sector, the quiet morning was disrupted by the arrival of a sleek, black luxury sedan gliding over cracked asphalt. The pristine vehicle came to a smooth halt directly in front of Connor's dilapidated garage doors, creating a stark contrast against the rusted surroundings. The driver opened the rear door of the sedan. Gabriel Turner stepped onto the cracked pavement, his posture reflecting decades of absolute authority. He entered the dim garage without invitation. The harsh fluorescent light illuminated his tailored overcoat, creating a sharp contrast against the industrial decay. Bypassing standard introductions, Gabriel walked directly toward the rusted coupe. His experienced eyes immediately locked onto the exposed engine block. He crouched beside the vehicle, examining the cleaned casting numbers without touching the cold metal. The silence in the room was absolute. Standing up, Gabriel finally turned to face Connor. He acknowledged that he had spent over 2 decades searching for this specific architectural anomaly. In a clear, measured tone, Gabriel offered $600,000. The funds were guaranteed to be transferred within 24 hours. Connor stood near the workbench. He did not react to the numerical figure. He simply shook his head in a quiet, definitive refusal. Gabriel accepted the boundary without argument. He placed a heavy, embossed business card on the metal table and turned toward the exit. The luxury sedan pulled away from the garage, leaving Connor alone once more with the mechanical artifact and the shifting balance of power. The refusal rippled through the upper echelons. At Clark Heritage, Madison stood abruptly from her desk, walking briskly toward the physical archive room. Madison entered the dimly lit, sterile archive room. Towering metal shelves housed decades of detailed transactional records and historical appraisals. She pulled the physical file folder for the recent estate auction, her manicured hands flipping through the pages with increasing urgency. Her eyes landed on the operational decision, vehicle section unlisted. No formal appraisal. The strategic omission was documented in black and white. Pulling a historical reference manual, she located the classified Project Ether section, noting the official record stating all experimental units had been destroyed. Madison closed the file slowly. The immense financial weight of her public miscalculation settled over her completely, shattering her carefully maintained composure. Leaving the corporate tower behind, Madison navigated her personal vehicle through the darkening city streets, driving alone toward the industrial sector. Back at the garage, Connor methodically arranged his provenance documents along the length of his steel workbench, preparing for the inevitable convergence. He placed the 1962 internal memo next to the unmailed fabrication letter, creating a perfect, undeniable chain of historical evidence. Outside, Madison's sleek car pulled to a quiet stop across from the illuminated, rusted doors of Connor's garage. She turned off the ignition and sat in the heavy silence, gripping the steering wheel, preparing to face the man she had publicly dismissed. Madison stepped out of her vehicle into the cool night air. The sharp click of her heels on the cracked pavement echoed through the empty industrial street. Pushing open the heavy, rusted side door, she transitioned from the dark exterior into the harsh fluorescent glare of the restoration space. Connor looked up from the steel workbench. His features remained entirely composed, showing no surprise at the unexpected arrival of the auction house executive. Halting a few feet away, Madison dropped her rigid corporate posture. She looked directly at the man she had previously dismissed. In a clear, unwavering voice, she delivered a direct professional acknowledgement of her catastrophic error regarding the off-catalog lot. Connor listened carefully. He did not interrupt, nor did his expression shift to reflect any sense of triumph or vindication. When she finished speaking, he simply nodded once. He accepted the statement as a factual clarification, nothing more and nothing less. Madison's gaze drifted past him, landing on the meticulously arranged documents and the exposed metal of the engine block. The undeniable physical proof of the multi-million-dollar prototype rested under the work lights, a stark visual confirmation of the lost asset. Before another word could be spoken, the sweeping glare of high-beam headlights cut through the garage windows. The elite network had arrived for the private appraisal. Several pristine black vehicles parked in formation on the cracked asphalt. A group of highly credentialed specialists and elite collectors stepped into the night air. The group entered the dim restoration space, carrying reinforced equipment cases. They moved with the quiet efficiency of professionals handling priceless artifacts. Xavier Reed, a leading independent appraiser, set his heavy case onto a side table. He extracted specialized metallurgical testing instruments without speaking. The ambient noise in the garage faded into absolute silence. Xavier approached the exposed engine block, equipping a magnifying loupe and a digital scanner. He meticulously examined the secondary casting marks from multiple angles, instantly cross-referencing the physical impressions against an encrypted archival database on his tablet. Connor remained at the perimeter of the room. He observed the rigorous inspection process with detached patience, offering no unsolicited commentary. A second analyst approached the rusted coupe, carefully extracting a microsample from the extended frame rail for immediate chemical and structural verification. Nearby, a university archivist utilized a UV light to inspect the 1962 internal memo, systematically verifying the paper composition and age of the ink. After 40 minutes of continuous evaluation, Xavier Reed stepped back from the vehicle. He removed his glasses, his expression reflecting absolute professional certainty. He addressed the gathered collectors, stating clearly that the physical evidence and documentation supported a single conclusion: the unit was perfectly authentic. The heavy silence broke instantly. The gathered collectors exchanged rapid, calculated glances, recalculating the value of the rusted asset in real time. A sharply dressed representative acting on behalf of an anonymous principal stepped forward into the center of the illuminated workspace. He formally announced an opening bid of $1,200,000, valid for immediate wire transfer. Before the statement fully settled, an older collector across the room raised a silver-tipped cane, countering with $1.5 million. The numerical values escalated quickly, moving openly through the cold air of the dilapidated garage as fortunes were casually repositioned. Connor remained entirely still beside the steel workbench. He watched the escalation without a single flicker of reaction on his rugged face. Standing near the back wall, Madison Clark tightened her jaw. The rapidly climbing figures quantified her exact professional failure in undeniable terms. The first representative felt a sudden vibration in his pocket. He extracted a secure mobile device, his eyes scanning a direct incoming message. He raised his right hand, a gesture that immediately cut through the escalating bids and commanded the room's undivided attention. In a steady voice, he stated a definitive offer of $2,140,000, subject only to written title transfer. The staggering numerical figure hung in the silent air. Competing collectors slowly lowered their bidding cards, effectively conceding the financial battlefield. The collective attention of the room shifted entirely to Connor. He pushed off the steel workbench, stepping fully into the harsh overhead illumination. Approaching the representative, Connor extended his hand. He accepted the leather-bound folder containing the formal transfer agreement without a word. He opened the folder and reviewed the legal terms meticulously. His eyes tracked across the dense contractual language with engineered precision. Extracting a metal pen from his jacket pocket, Connor deliberately struck through a single, highly specific line of text on the second page. With smooth, deliberate strokes, he signed his name at the bottom of the amended document, binding the multi-million-dollar transaction. Handing the folder back, Connor clearly stated his singular condition: the vehicle chassis would transfer, but the prototype engine block remained in his possession. The representative reviewed the physical amendment, nodded in professional agreement, and extended his hand. The historical transaction was officially finalized. The tension in the room dissolved. The elite crowd began to disperse, filtering out of the rusted garage and back into the dark industrial street. Madison Clark did not move with the crowd. She remained against the brick wall, fully processing the absolute depth of Connor's strategic mastery. By dawn, a specialized enclosed transport truck arrived at the industrial sector under a heavy, overcast sky. A team of logistics professionals carefully loaded the rusted coupe chassis onto the hydraulic ramp, leaving the engine bay entirely empty. Connor stood in the open doorway. He watched the multi-million-dollar shell depart with the calm detachment of a man whose real work was already finished. Madison remained nearby in the cool morning air. She observed the loading process, fully registering the physical reality of the empty engine bay. Turning to Connor, she stated cleanly that Clark Heritage would be restructuring its entire internal appraisal protocol by Monday morning. Connor met her gaze. He offered a slight, respectful tilt of his head, acknowledging the operational shift without unnecessary dialogue. Madison turned away, walking to her vehicle. Her posture was different now, stripped of its former arrogance, replaced by sharp, calculated caution. The transport truck pulled away, and Madison's sedan followed shortly after, leaving the cracked asphalt empty once more. Connor retreated into the garage, pulling the heavy metal door shut against the cold morning wind. He approached the workbench where the pristine prototype engine block sat under the warm lamp, a priceless mechanical heart, waiting for his next move. Inside the garage, Connor initiated the preservation process. He applied a specialized anti-corrosive sealant over the exposed metal of the prototype engine block. He then constructed a reinforced steel and wood crate, sealing the multi-million-dollar artifact away from the abrasive industrial environment. Heavy padlocks were secured. The dilapidated garage was no longer just a workspace, it had transitioned into a high-security vault. Across the city, the atmosphere inside the Clark Heritage boardroom was suffocating. A panel of senior directors reviewed the quarterly auction discrepancies. At the head of the long mahogany table, Madison Clark stood. She faced the intense scrutiny of the board without breaking eye contact. An older board member pointed to the documented financial loss from the Breer estate, questioning her ongoing capability to lead the firm. Instead of deflecting, Madison distributed a new, aggressive appraisal protocol document. She coldly outlined the systemic changes required for their survival. Back at the industrial outskirts, a private courier arrived at Connor's locked door. The man wore a pristine uniform, holding a single sealed envelope. Connor signed for the delivery. The heavy parchment bore no corporate logo, only a wax seal marking it as top-tier private correspondence. Breaking the seal, Connor read the short, handwritten note. Gabriel Turner was requesting a private audience regarding the heart of the machine. Connor folded the heavy parchment. His expression remained unreadable as he calculated the precise strategic value of Gabriel Turner's direct invitation. He drafted a single-line response, specifying a neutral, highly secure meeting time, and handed the sealed envelope back to the waiting courier. Meanwhile, Madison Clark sat in her glass-walled office, systematically executing the new corporate protocols. Her signature aggressively terminated outdated appraisal contracts. At the scheduled hour, Gabriel Turner's luxury sedan arrived at the industrial vault. He stepped out alone, carrying a sleek leather portfolio. Inside, the environment was stripped of all distractions. A simple steel table separated Connor and Gabriel, with the secured engine crate resting heavily in the background. Gabriel bypassed standard pleasantries. He detailed the historical and engineering significance of the prototype, acknowledging its unparalleled position in industrial history. Opening his portfolio, the billionaire extracted a blank, certified financial draft. He placed it on the steel table, offering a limitless financial proposition. Connor looked at the document, then slowly slid it back across the cold metal surface. He stated clearly that the engine was no longer a simple commodity. Instead of a singular payout, Connor outlined his terms, a controlling partnership stake in Turner's exclusive restoration syndicate. He demanded structural equity, not just capital. Gabriel studied the rugged mechanic for a long moment. Recognizing a true strategic peer, the billionaire nodded slowly and extended his hand to seal the new empire. Months later, the architectural footprint of the dilapidated garage had been completely transformed. Heavy steel doors slid open to reveal a pristine, climate-controlled restoration facility. Connor Hayes walked across the spotless epoxy floor. Shedding the grease-stained leather, he wore a tailored industrial work shirt, surveying his newly established domain. At the absolute center of the facility, the original prototype engine block rested inside a custom, illuminated glass vault, a permanent monument to strategic patience. Gabriel Turner stood beside the glass enclosure. He handed Connor a classified dossier, signaling the initiation of their first joint international acquisition. Across the city, Madison Clark stood firmly behind a minimalist podium inside the Clark Heritage Corporate Auditorium, addressing a meticulously selected cohort of new appraisers. A massive digital display illuminated behind her, projecting a stark, high-resolution image of the exact rusted coupe she had previously dismissed at the estate auction. She utilized her own catastrophic financial miscalculation as the primary case study. Her voice commanded the room, emphasizing that technical verification must always supersede superficial aesthetics. Back at the facility, Connor spread the newly delivered dossier across an expansive architectural drafting table, illuminating the complex schematics. The documents detailed rumors of another decommissioned experimental chassis, buried deep within a forgotten European industrial archive since the late 1950s. Connor studied the geometric anomalies in the blueprints. He locked eyes with Gabriel and nodded slowly. The hunt for the next lost artifact was officially underway. Inside the pristine lab, Connor packed a heavy, reinforced case with advanced metallurgical scanners and precise calibration tools. At the private airfield, Gabriel Turner stood on the tarmac, finalizing the flight logistics with his aviation crew beside a sleek corporate jet. Connor approached the aircraft. He carried the heavy equipment case effortlessly, his focus entirely locked on the impending technical extraction. The aircraft ascended rapidly, cutting through heavy cloud cover as it initiated the transatlantic route toward the European industrial sector. Back in the corporate tower, Madison's executive assistant intercepted a flagged aviation manifest and delivered the tablet directly to her desk. Reviewing the flight path, Madison precisely pinpointed the destination, a restricted, historic manufacturing district located in Central Europe. She immediately summoned her newly appointed lead technical appraiser, a sharp, highly trained analyst molded by her rigorous new protocols. Handing him a rapid deployment travel dossier, Madison issued a singular, uncompromising directive: intercept and secure the undocumented European asset first. Miles across the ocean, the private jet descended through cold, driving rain, touching down on the slick, illuminated tarmac of the foreign airfield. Connor and Gabriel stepped out into the harsh weather. Standing in the freezing rain, the second chapter of their industrial conquest officially commenced. A heavy utility vehicle navigated the slick, narrow cobblestone streets, arriving at the towering iron gates of an abandoned manufacturing complex. Inside the cavernous structure, rainwater dripped from the deteriorating roof, echoing off the rusted machinery of a forgotten industrial era. Utilizing a handheld flashlight and the vintage blueprints, Connor navigated the labyrinth, stopping before a massive, sealed iron vault door. He crouched before the heavy locking mechanism, extracting a diagnostic scanner to analyze the structural integrity of the oxidized metal. The quiet rhythm of the rain was abruptly shattered by the aggressive screech of tires as a convoy of black vehicles breached the main floor. Madison's lead appraiser stepped from the lead vehicle. He adjusted his glasses, flanked by a disciplined corporate logistics team. Descending the grated iron stairs, the appraiser approached the vault, intercepting Connor and Gabriel just before the extraction could begin. With calculated confidence, the appraiser produced a certified legal injunction, officially halting any physical interference with the facility's assets. Gabriel reviewed the stamped document under the harsh flashlight beam. His jaw tightened as he recognized the immediate bureaucratic roadblock. Connor did not look at the paperwork. He simply placed his bare hand against the cold iron door, entirely unfazed by the corporate posturing. Disregarding the corporate demands, Connor adjusted the frequency dial on his high-tech diagnostic scanner with deliberate precision. Instead of targeting the central lock, he placed the device against a seemingly insignificant oxidized rivet near the base of the massive door. A deep, resounding mechanical clank echoed through the basement. Connor had utilized his historical knowledge to trigger a hidden architectural failsafe. With a solid push of his shoulder, the heavy iron door groaned and swung open. The appraiser stepped backward, entirely stunned. Flashlight beams pierced the stagnant, dusty air of the pitch-black interior, revealing the hidden chamber. At the center of the room rested a pristine, unpainted silver aerodynamic experimental chassis, perfectly preserved since the 1950s. Recovering from his shock, the lead appraiser aggressively attempted to push past the men to physically tag the asset. Gabriel Turner smoothly stepped into his path, raising a faded, original manufacturer's deed of ownership retrieved from the blueprints. The appraiser's eyes darted across the superseding historical document. His recent legal injunction was instantly rendered powerless. Leaving the corporate standoff behind him, Connor walked slowly toward the silver chassis, assessing the magnificent machinery in absolute silence. Outside the factory, the lead appraiser stood in the relentless rain, relaying the operational failure through a secure encrypted call. In her office, Madison absorbed the report. She did not raise her voice, she simply terminated the call, recognizing a superior strategy. By dawn, a heavy industrial helicopter lifted the secured container from the European site, transporting the chassis across the continent. Days later in the American high-tech facility, Connor dismantled the transport crate, exposing the unpainted aerodynamic body to the bright laboratory lights. He positioned the silver chassis parallel to the original prototype engine block, preparing to reverse 60 years of mechanical separation. From the elevated observation deck, Gabriel Turner watched in absolute silence, witnessing the culmination of his decades-long pursuit. Operating a precision hydraulic crane, Connor smoothly lifted the heavy iron engine from its display mount. He guided the massive block over the empty engine bay of the silver chassis, lowering it with millimeter precision. The heavy metal settled perfectly onto the original suspension mounts. Connor secured the primary bolts, officially marrying the components. Stepping back, he wiped his hands with an industrial cloth. The lost mechanical legend was finally whole. The following week, a heavy, black parchment envelope was placed directly onto Madison Clark's polished desk. Breaking the dark wax seal, she read the minimalist invitation to the private unveiling of the completed Project Ether. On the evening of the event, the high-tech restoration facility was transformed into an exclusive gallery for the industrial elite. At the center of the immaculate floor, the restored vehicle rested quietly beneath a heavy, tailored silk cover. Madison arrived at the venue, navigating the crowd with calculated grace, fully acknowledging the shift in the industry's hierarchy. Connor stood near the covered machine. Shedding his industrial gear, he wore a sharp, tailored suit, exuding quiet authority. As Madison approached, Connor met her gaze. They exchanged a brief, definitive nod of professional respect. Gabriel Turner addressed the room, his brief remarks highlighting the historical significance of the mechanical resurrection. The room fell into absolute silence as Connor stepped forward, grasping the edge of the dark silk cover. With one fluid motion, he pulled the fabric back, revealing the flawless, gleaming silver prototype to the mesmerized audience. The morning after the historic unveiling, the facility returned to absolute quiet. Connor wiped down the silver chassis, fully absorbing the gravity of his achievement. The tranquility was disrupted by the roar of an aggressive European supercar tearing into the facility's private courtyard. Alexander Vance, a ruthless continental industrialist, stepped onto the pavement, flanked immediately by two silent corporate attorneys. Vance bypassed the security protocols, entering the pristine lab with the predatory confidence of a man accustomed to taking what he desired. Approaching the silver prototype, Vance did not offer congratulations. Instead, he dropped a massive, heavily bound legal dossier onto Connor's workbench. Connor slowly opened the leather binder. The documents detailed a hostile corporate acquisition of the entire historical sector where the lab was built. Vance spoke with smooth, calculated precision, revealing that he had quietly purchased the underlying debt of the facility's land rights. Before the ultimatum could settle, the heavy steel doors slid open again. Gabriel Turner strode into the laboratory, his expression darkening instantly. Gabriel and Vance locked eyes across the gleaming hood of the prototype, a silent collision of two deeply entrenched historical rivals. Unfazed by the corporate crossfire, Connor snapped the heavy binder shut with a resounding echo, signaling that his empire would not be intimidated. Vance maintained an arrogant smirk, absolutely certain that his aggressive legal strategy had cornered the two men. Instead of arguing, Connor smoothly extracted a supplementary appraisal photograph from the back of Vance's own corporate dossier. Laying the high-resolution image on the steel workbench, Connor pointed directly to the suspension weld marks on Vance's prized European flagship vehicle. In a quiet, measured tone, Connor observed that the welds were clearly post-1970s automated production, definitively proving the vehicle was a high-end replica. Vance's confident demeanor evaporated instantly. The crushing realization that his foundational asset was unauthentic drained the color from his face. Standing beside the silver prototype, Gabriel observed the precise dismantling of his rival with a slow, deeply satisfied smile. Connor offered a stark negotiation, absolute silence regarding the counterfeit asset in exchange for the immediate nullification of the hostile land acquisition. A corporate attorney stepped forward to object, but Vance sharply raised his hand, commanding absolute silence from his legal team. With a rigid, trembling hand, Vance retrieved a pen and signed the release addendum, officially dissolving his leverage over the facility. Without another word, the industrialist turned and exited the laboratory, his sweeping corporate strike entirely neutralized by superior technical knowledge. As the heavy steel doors sealed shut behind the retreating industrialist, Gabriel Turner carefully folded the signed land release addendum. The immediate threat neutralized, the syndicate returned to its primary objective. Weeks later, Madison Clark arrived at the facility, this time under formal invitation. Stepping into the laboratory, she observed the expansive, high-tech operation Connor had systematically built from the ground up. Meeting Connor at the central drafting table, Madison did not posture or demand. She simply placed a high-security encrypted drive onto the glass surface. She detailed that the drive contained over a century of sealed archival records from Clark Heritage, classified coordinates of lost industrial prototypes. Madison proposed a structural alliance, her corporate intelligence network combined with their unparalleled technical extraction capabilities. Connor inserted the drive into the main terminal. A high-resolution global map illuminated the dark room, marked with dozens of unverified historical sites. Gabriel analyzed the vast network of data, immediately recognizing the staggering scale of the undiscovered mechanical wealth. Connor accepted the strategic partnership, establishing strict operational boundaries that ensured the syndicate retained absolute technical authority. Madison agreed without hesitation. The alliance forged a new, invincible trinity within the elite global restoration market. The glowing holographic map zoomed rapidly onto a specific coordinate deep within the snow-covered peaks of the Swiss Alps. Madison detailed the target, a legendary pre-war aerospace automotive hybrid engine, sealed inside a decommissioned military bunker for over 80 years. Gabriel outlined the immense logistical barriers, citing extreme sub-zero temperatures, avalanche risks, and highly restricted international airspace. Connor took control of the technical briefing. He displayed CAD schematics for a custom-built, heavily armored all-terrain extraction vehicle. Over the next 3 weeks, the high-tech facility echoed with the sound of industrial welding as Connor reinforced the steel tracks of the transport unit. Simultaneously, Madison utilized her corporate leverage, securing exclusive transport permits through a series of ruthless, high-level phone negotiations. On the designated departure day, Gabriel oversaw the secure loading of the massive extraction vehicle into the cargo hold of a military-grade transport plane. The three partners stood on the icy tarmac, watching the loading sequence complete, a perfect synchronization of intelligence, capital, and engineering. The heavy transport plane roared down the runway, ascending violently into a darkening winter storm system moving across the Atlantic. Inside the freezing cargo hold, Connor systematically checked the tension of the winch cables, entirely focused on the impending Alpine extraction. The military transport plane touched down heavily on a remote, ice-covered airstrip deep within the Swiss Alps. The rear cargo ramp lowered slowly, exposing the interior to the violent, freezing winds of a high-altitude blizzard. With a roar of diesel power, Connor piloted the heavily armored tracked extraction vehicle out into the blinding white storm. Inside the aircraft's mobile command center, Madison and Gabriel tracked the vehicle's telemetry across a digital topographical display. The specialized machine carved a relentless path through deep snowdrifts, methodically ascending the treacherous, sheer mountain terrain. Inside the reinforced cabin, Connor steered with precise, calculated movements, his expression illuminated by the glowing instrument panel. Approaching a severe ice incline, the vehicle deployed heavy mechanical anchors, securing its grip against the sheer vertical drop. As the aggressive blizzard briefly fractured, a massive, camouflaged steel blast door emerged from the jagged alpine rock face. Connor brought the heavy transport to a synchronized halt directly before the colossal entrance of the decommissioned military bunker. Stepping out into the sub-zero wind, he stood before the sealed iron barrier, confronting an obstacle untouched for 80 years. Approaching the colossal barrier, Connor deployed a specialized thermal lance, surgically targeting the frozen pneumatic lines of the ancient locking mechanism. With a deafening crack of shattering ice, the massive steel door groaned inward, breaking a seal that had held for over 80 years. Connor stepped into the absolute darkness of the cavernous bunker, activating a high-lumen shoulder lamp to cut through the freezing air. The interior was a frozen time capsule. Rows of decommissioned military hardware sat silently under a thick layer of perennial frost. Navigating deep into the subterranean complex, he located a secondary reinforced containment cell situated at the far end of the facility. Bypassing the manual latch, Connor revealed the target, a massive, incredibly complex aerospace automotive hybrid engine, gleaming perfectly under the harsh light. He immediately initiated a secure satellite uplink, transmitting an encrypted visual confirmation of the pristine artifact back to the transport plane. Inside the mobile command center, Madison and Gabriel observed the live feed. The historical intelligence had proven absolutely flawless. Back in the bunker, Connor systematically attached heavy-duty carbon fiber rigging cables to the engine's primary structural mounts. Suddenly, a deep, resonant rumble echoed through the subterranean chamber. The shifting thermal pressure was rapidly destabilizing the ancient ice above. Ignoring the falling debris, Connor engaged the remote winch mechanism, prioritizing the absolute safety of the historical asset. The high-tension steel cables groaned, dragging the massive hybrid engine across the frozen concrete as the bunker's ceiling fractured. As a colossal chunk of ancient ice shattered against the floor, Connor vaulted into the reinforced cabin of the extraction vehicle. He slammed the heavy transmission into reverse. The steel tracks chewed into the ice, aggressively pulling the payload out of the collapse zone. Aboard the transport plane, the topographical monitors flared red. Madison and Gabriel watched the mountain's structural integrity rapidly deteriorate. Through the encrypted comms channel, Madison issued a direct, uncompromising exfiltration order, demanding immediate evacuation. The armored vehicle erupted from the subterranean entrance, clearing the threshold a fraction of a second before a massive avalanche sealed the bunker permanently. Back in the violently swirling blizzard, Connor secured the priceless engine onto the rear transport bed, locking the hydraulic clamps. With the target secured, he navigated the heavy machine toward the steep precipice, initiating a perilous, controlled descent down the mountain. The twin beams of the vehicle's headlights pierced the aggressive whiteout, carrying the greatest mechanical discovery of the century back to the airstrip. Emerging from the dense storm, the battered extraction vehicle finally reached the flat ice of the remote Alpine airstrip. Connor navigated the heavy tracks directly up the lowered steel ramp of the waiting military transport plane. Inside the cavernous cargo hold, he cut the diesel engine. The immense machine hissed into absolute silence. Madison and Gabriel immediately descended from the command center, their eyes locked entirely on the recovered historical asset. Approaching the flatbed, Gabriel wiped away a layer of frost, marveling at the untouched precision of the pre-war aerospace engineering. Checking her tactical tablet, Madison noted a critical drop in barometric pressure, ordering the pilots to initiate immediate takeoff procedures. The massive hydraulic ramp sealed shut, locking out the sub-zero temperatures and securing the multi-million-dollar payload. Outside, the four massive jet engines roared to maximum thrust, fighting for traction along the rapidly freezing runway. The transport aircraft violently broke contact with the Earth, ascending through the aggressive storm system to begin the transatlantic journey home. Days later, inside the pristine American facility, the massive hybrid engine was gently lowered onto a custom diagnostic workstation. Connor initiated the meticulous teardown of the hybrid engine under the bright, clinical lights of the laboratory, documenting every component. Using advanced ultrasonic cleaning tanks, he stripped away decades of alpine frost and oxidized oil, revealing pristine aerospace-grade titanium. Deep within the engine block, he uncovered a highly advanced dual supercharger system, a mechanical anomaly decades ahead of its era. Meanwhile, from her corporate headquarters, Madison preemptively engaged in ruthless international litigation against foreign salvage claims. Armed with centuries-old treaties and the original bunker manifests, she secured an impenetrable legal barricade around the syndicate's absolute ownership. Leveraging this airtight provenance, Gabriel operated from the facility's glass observation deck, privately contacting an exclusive network of global billionaires. Back on the laboratory floor, Connor reassembled the core components, calibrating the massive aerospace pistons with microscopic precision. The rebuilt engine was finally mounted onto a heavy steel diagnostic testing stand, resembling a breathtaking piece of industrial art. Connor connected thick ignition harnesses and heavy fuel lines, methodically preparing the machine for its first hot fire test in 80 years. Gabriel and Madison descended to the main floor, standing in absolute silence beside Connor as he placed his hand over the digital ignition panel. Connor engaged the digital ignition sequence. The high-capacity starter motor whined, forcing 80 years of static history into rapid mechanical motion. The aerospace hybrid engine erupted into life with a deafening roar, expelling perfectly tuned blue exhaust flames into the laboratory ventilation system. Diagnostic monitors flooded with green telemetry data. The internal components operated with absolute, flawless precision, validating the extensive restoration effort. Observing the perfect operational metrics, Gabriel finalized the encrypted broadcast, notifying his elite network that the legendary artifact was fully functional. Within hours, a procession of ultra-luxury vehicles glided through the facility gates, carrying the most heavily vetted industrial collectors in the world. The high-tech laboratory transitioned into an impenetrable, private auction space. The assembled billionaires analyzed the idling engine with intense, calculated interest. Madison controlled the perimeter, ensuring strict adherence to her corporate acquisition protocols. She orchestrated the exclusive viewing with uncompromising authority. At the center of the room, the mechanical masterpiece maintained a steady, powerful rhythm, a living monument to unparalleled pre-war engineering. The financial escalation began without a single spoken word. Millions of dollars shifted through discreet nods, subtle hand gestures, and intense eye contact. The rapid escalation abruptly halted when an anonymous representative raised a solid black bidding card, introducing an astronomical, record-breaking figure. The room remained frozen in absolute silence. The black card was held high, representing a financial figure that fundamentally altered the global restoration market. Madison verified the astronomical bid through a secure digital terminal, confirming the immediate availability of the requested funds. Recognizing the sheer scale of the offer, the competing billionaires slowly lowered their hands, formally conceding the financial battlefield. Connor approached the control panel and initiated the shutdown sequence. The deafening roar of the aerospace engine faded into a deep, resonant mechanical stillness. The anonymous representative stepped forward to the steel workbench, using a heavy fountain pen to sign the binding transfer documents. Madison oversaw the final procedural steps, applying the Clark Heritage seal to the acquisition file, closing the most lucrative chapter in her career. The elite crowd slowly dispersed, filing out of the pristine laboratory and returning to their waiting luxury vehicles in the cold night. Inside the emptying facility, the three partners stood together beside the cooling engine block, having successfully orchestrated a flawless industrial resurrection. Gabriel reached into his tailored jacket and produced a new, highly encrypted digital drive, placing it deliberately on the glass drafting table. Connor picked up the drive. The successful sale of the hybrid engine was not a conclusion, but merely the funding for their next monumental extraction. Connor inserted the newly acquired drive into the primary terminal. The system instantly decrypted a vast, untapped network of hidden industrial artifacts. The high-resolution display shifted, revealing topographical coordinates buried deep within uncharted global territories, the next frontier of their empire. Gabriel Turner observed the glowing map. His decades of isolated searching had successfully evolved into an unprecedented global monopoly. Madison Clark stepped forward, already calculating the international acquisition protocols. Her corporate intelligence network was primed for immediate deployment. Staring into the blue light, Connor internalized the mechanical challenges ahead. The initial victory was merely the foundation of a legacy. Behind them, the empty red steel diagnostic stand served as a silent testament to their unparalleled capabilities and absolute operational supremacy. The heavy steel doors of the high-tech restoration facility began to slide shut, sealing the elite syndicate inside their new command center. Outside, the first light of dawn broke over the industrial sector, illuminating the perimeter of an untouchable corporate fortress. The city awakened, entirely unaware of the shifting power dynamics and the colossal financial empire established in its shadows. Inside the dark laboratory, the digital map pulsed steadily. The hunt for history's greatest lost machines had only just begun.